firms and what rules need reform is now called to order. I'm going to start off with an opening statement so that everybody understands the procedure. I'll make an opening statement. The ranking member will make an opening statement. Other members can submit opening statements in writing. They'll be filed. And then we will proceed with the testimony of the first panel, comprised of 3 witnesses, and I will give you instructions at that time. I'm still trying to catch my breath. I actually came up from the basement, and at my age, I shouldn't have done that, but the stairs are killers. I'm very interested in the results of a recent survey of small business owners conducted by Suffolk University and released by the American Management Services. The poll found that 63% of respondents believe that the federal government is doing nothing to help small businesses. 64% believe that the administration and the SBA specifically aren't doing enough for small businesses. This poll reflects the current challenging climate in which many small owners struggling just to stay afloat may find themselves today. The volatile cost of gasoline, the ever-increasing cost for health care, and the crumbling house market are negatively impacting small businesses. Tough times like these highlight the federal government's responsibility to make sure we're not placing undue burdens on the small business community. Under the best of circumstances, operating a small business is an enormous undertaking. For many entrepreneurs, business begins and ends at their desk, and there are never enough hours in any given day. The last thing these men and women need is to be bogged down by excessive paperwork, but unfortunately, complex federal regulations have already created a time-consuming logistical nightmare for countless small businesses throughout our country. Many government regulations use one-size-fits-all policies that often fail to account for small business needs. Consequently, small firms end up bearing a disproportionate share of the federal regulatory burden. Despite having tighter profit margins, they are forced to pay more to comply with government rules than their corporate counterparts. This discrepancy is so great, in fact, that the small enterprises spend 45% more on regulatory compliance than big businesses. That adds up to $2,400 in additional fees per employee. And when it comes to various other regulations, the differences are greater still. Some of these rules can cost small businesses as much as 364% more to comply. One specific regulation, tax reporting, is 67% more expensive. In other words, we are forcing small businesses with limited capital to pay more than big businesses with deep pockets. In an attempt to address this inequity, Congress passed the Regulatory Flexibility Act way back in 1980, which requires government agencies to consider the effects of their policies in small businesses. But after 3 decades, it has fallen short of accomplishing its original goal. This is because RegFlex tends to be inconsistent in its application. For example, there is no uniform method of practicing Section 610, which, if properly employed, would stem the inequities currently facing small firms. Section 610 requires federal agencies to periodically review rules and gauge their impact on small businesses. But while it is a good requirement in its design, it has not been applied consistently. Recognizing RegFlex's shortcomings, this committee has already taken steps to improve this system. Last December, we passed H.R. 4458, which will significantly overhaul the regulatory process. Among other provisions, the bill introduced by Mr. Brad Ellsworth of this committee provides important clarification to Section 610. In that same vein, the Small Business Administration launched the Regulatory Review and Reform Initiative, or R3, last year. This rule promises to improve the RegFlex system by identifying and addressing its ineffective policies. It will also allow entrepreneurs to raise their own concerns and suggest targeted reforms. R3 has the potential to be an invaluable resource for small firms. It will not only give them a voice in the federal regulation process, but it will also address some of their most significant challenges. For example, SBA's Office of Advocacy hopes to use this rule to simplify tax policies for at-home businesses. R3 promises to confront this issue along with other concerns head-on. As we will discuss today, many federal compliance policies are outdated and unnecessarily complex. Small business owners should not have to put hours of their time towards untangling these regulations, because as this committee and our entrepreneurs well know, such time would be better spent on conducting business as usual. In today's hearing, we will look at the effects of regulatory burdens on small firms. We will also explore potential solutions such as the Small Business Regulatory Improvement Act and the R3 program. I want to thank all of the witnesses in advance for their testimony. The committee is pleased they could join us today, and we look forward to their insight on these issues. At this time, it is my privilege to yield to the ranking member, Mr. Westmoreland, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me just say I really appreciate the chairman having these hearings. He and I have talked, and I come from a small business background. I was in the real estate building development business, and I certainly understand federal regulations on small business. And as the chairman and I have talked, we've come up with different subject matter that we want to have hearing on, and I really do thank him for this. When I was elected to serve in Congress, I was issued a mandate by my constituents to reduce the impact of federal government on our daily lives. And after 4 years, I don't know that I may have failed in that, because I can't think of anything we've reduced in the last 4 years. I am all too aware of the feeling that our own government is working against us. This us versus them belief is held in small businesses all across this country, and honestly, I cannot blame anyone for thinking that, because most small business people, Mr. Chairman, work 18 to 20 hours a day just trying to keep their small business in business, and they really don't have time to keep an eye on the government and what the government is doing to try to revamp or reorganize their business to make the government seem like they have a responsibility. Recent government estimates place the cost of complying with federal regulations at $1.1 trillion. That averages out to about $10,000 per household, and I don't know how much per small business. But we're here today to constructively address what we already know. Excess federal regulations negatively impact America. I think Washington has made a few good steps. However, they have been baby steps. President Bush's executive order directing federal agencies to place more emphasis on the economic impact of regulatory proposals is a good idea. However, I feel that it missed an opportunity by not addressing the loopholes in the Regulatory Flexibility Act. The executive order also stops short of preventing agencies from using narrow interpretations of Reg Flex in order to ignore their congressionally imposed responsibilities. SBA's Office of Advocacy is to be commended for its proactive approach to reducing this burden on small business. The R3 program is another step towards this goal, involving stakeholders in the process of pinpointing rules that merit review makes good sense. However, the combination of federal agencies' distaste for transparency at the Office of Advocacy's lack of authority to force those agencies to consider reforming unnecessary regulations creates an environment where very little can be accomplished. To be clear, I'm not waving the white flag at this issue. Everyone in this room has a vested interest in seeing small businesses grow and thrive in a global marketplace. In order for that to happen, we must work to increase American competitiveness by reforming and removing the regulations that restrict growth. This is a top priority for me and our nation's businesses, and the question is it a priority for the agencies in Washington? I welcome these distinguished guests, witnesses, panelists, and I want to thank your willingness to come here and testify and take some tough questions. And again, Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing.